Welcome to my channel, guys. If you're looking for an amazing novel, visit my Patreon page. Your support will help turn this story into an exciting audiobook. Join me on this journey. Chapter 171. 170. Freedom. Third POV. While Azimuth was busy transforming an ordinary, albeit gigantic robot into a cannon of mass destruction, Gwen and Lex had enough of each other and finished their vulgarity, finally coming to their senses. Photo. It was great, said naked Gwen, who had regained her skin and ceased to be an anodite, panting heavily, lying on the bare earth, in a round crater. I agree. It was a bit wild, but cool, said Lex, who was lying next to her, finally regaining his sanity and also regaining his human form. Are you okay? Gwen asked, catching her breath, looking into her boyfriend's eyes with concern. Physically, I'm very tired. Magically, completely empty. Mentally, crushed. Lex said honestly, closing his eyes. Well, it's no wonder you don't have any mana left, since you used so much of it, completely disregarding the expense, scattering it around and destroying the robots. It's good that there are no other problems, considering that you almost became a living bomb. And it must have cost you a lot of physical strength to become anodite. Gwen said, trying to be gentle with what she thought was a highly emotionally unstable Lex. Perhaps the fault lies with someone else who beat me like a racehorse and asked for more and more, Lex said with a dirty grin, glancing at Gwen, including for to dispel the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded the girl, due to the fact that she was worried about him. If you're joking, then everything is in order, Gwen said relieved, then pinched Lex's side with a wicked smile and added, don't you dare talk about it. I feel awkward. Besides, who's hitting whom here? Mr. Who took the super soldier serum. Oi! Lex exclaimed in pain to satisfy the indignant Gwen, sighed and said, touché. Ha 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 ha. Laughing heartily at Lex's behavior, Gwen exhaled and asked more calmly, well, seriously, how are you? Bad of course, Lex said honestly with a heavy sigh, then adding, I screwed up again, lost control, almost ruined the entire planet, and worst of all, put you in danger again because of my own mistake that I swore never to repeat after the pyrokinesis tattoo story. You do realize that it was just a stupid coincidence and we just couldn't prevent it? Gwen asked with sympathy, trying to support the guy as much as possible. It is rather my own arrogance, temperament and incontinence that are to blame. Well, Azimuth with his grouchy disposition did not improve the situation either, although I myself knew that such a thing was to be expected, and it was just necessary to show restraint. But I was definitely not up to it when I was filled with anger because I admitted that Morgana fell into the trap of the Omnitrix. And again, all because of my greed. Another lesson of fate and a reminder that the world is not a game, Lex said calmly, having already spent all the emotional fuse earlier. I'm not a little girl and I can take care of myself, so you don't have to worry about me all the time. It seems to me that I have already proved it today. You can rely on me in difficult times and stop pushing me away, as you did for the last 24 hours. Perhaps if you had opened up to me more, none of this would have happened, Gwen said sternly, grabbing Lex by the face. You are right, of course. But, it's really hard to do. I'm used to doing everything myself and being a big stone wall that protects my loved ones. I was sure that it would continue like this, and I would always be steadfast, not needing any support. All I wanted was for you, Ashley, Hope, and Grandpa to be safe so that I could always get back to you, while I would solve all the problems myself. Lex admitted with a sigh. That's not how trusting relationships work. They should be equal, and what you describe is more like a dictatorship. Furrowed his brows, Gwen said. I know. It seems like it's the kid in me who wants to be in control so that everything goes according to his plan. But life doesn't work that way. Apparently, Grandpa was right and I never grew up. Although it seemed to me that I understood these truths a long time ago, they again showed me that I was wrong. Lex sighed and closed his eyes. I hope the lesson has been learned, Gwen asked, resting her head on the boy's shoulder. If I didn't learn anything new after all that happened, then I would be completely lost. So, yes, lesson learned. I do not promise that I will stop getting into different adventures without you and solving problems on my own, but I promise that if I need your support, even if it is only moral, I will always turn to you, Lex said with a smile, patting the girl on the head. I don't ask for more, Gwen said with the same smile. But then he added, I noticed a tendency that if you move away from us, your relatives, then something bad will definitely happen. So do not dare to do this again, and if you need help and support, do not even think of doubting, immediately come to us. The next time I start to go crazy, I will immediately come to you, Lex said with a smirk, thinking to himself that Gwen was right. The last time he got into a fight with Gwen over Hope's presence, the problem was soon revealed to be the pyrokinesis tattoo, and that tattoo alone. And now, when, because of the situation with Morgana, because of anger at himself, because of his mistake, he moved away from his loved ones, everything went to hell. Perhaps this is just a coincidence, but there really is a trend. And when they worked with the whole family against Victor, everything went off without a hitch. Feels like the world is punishing Lex for his arrogance, and is trying to re-educate him so that he stops being so arrogant and begins to perceive this world for real, and begins to understand that he cannot cope alone. Obviously, all these problems are connected with the fact that Lex, although he was reborn in a body, but the mind is still trying to cling to the past, in which he was alone and could not rely on anyone. Of course, Lex values Max very much, and loves Gwen, and Ashley, and Hope, because he is really ready to do anything to protect them. But even now he is trying not to let them get too close to his heart, as he is afraid of pricking himself. He truly genuinely loves his girls and tries his best to trust them, but getting over himself is incredibly difficult, and some barriers have not been broken. As much as Lex would not like to believe it, he really is still a vulnerable child, who has not let go of his past, which, even after so many years, continues to influence him. Not in vain, he was never able to accept his new parents, whom he is even afraid to remember, due to the fact that this could hurt his tender feelings. Obviously, Lex refused to accept and comprehend this, but today's events really helped him open his eyes to this, and finally, there was progress, although not significant. As they say, the first step is to see the problem, and then it will be easier. Our boy began to grow up and understand that the past is in the past and it is worth letting it go, for the sake of the present, which is admittedly beautiful. And this simple realization, which he had rejected for so long, reduced the burden on his shoulders very much. I'm not as perfect as I'd like to think, Lex thought as he looked down at his hands, but then clenched his fists with determination, added to himself, but that doesn't mean I can't get better. With this support, I can't give up. I don't want to admit it, but I will make mistakes, and there's nothing to be done about it, such is life. I just need to overcome them and fix everything. Now, I really see it in your eyes, Gwen said with a smile. Yes, I think I really learned something today. And this lesson I will remember for the rest of my life, Lex said with a sincere smile when Gwen kissed him with happiness, because her beloved returned and became free from the demons that tormented him. Chapter 172. 171. New Mysteries. Third POV. Two teenagers continued to hug each other in the crater, enjoying each other's warmth, while the guy accepted his flaws and mentally reborn to become a more mature person, and the girl was glad that she was able to return her beloved boyfriend, and that he was able to overcome today's events, instead of plunging into the abyss of self-flagellation. But this couldn't go on for long, because they still had unfinished business, so the girl lifted her head from the guy's shoulder and reluctantly asked, "We should probably go already, right?" The guy opened his eyes and, looking at the girl, nodded decisively and said, "Yes, it's time for me to correct my mistakes and deal with the annoying squid. Then we should hurry. Tetrax, Gluto and Azimuth have already been waiting and are probably already worried that we have been gone for a long time. I hope they are okay." Standing up slowly, Gwen said, "Don't worry. Tetrax is strong enough to take care of himself and smart enough to keep his head down when it's dangerous around him. I think he just waited out my rampage and the robot attack somewhere safe so that Gluto and Azimuth wouldn't get hurt, and now they are either looking for us, or, knowing Azimuth, they are creating some kind of weapon of mass destruction against Vilgax's reinforcements," Lex said calmly, handing Gwen the spare clothes he keeps for her in his dimensional ring. "Let's hope you're right," Gwen said thoughtfully, dressing and not at all embarrassed by her nakedness, because there is nothing to be embarrassed about. Everything has already happened. Lex, who no longer needs ordinary clothes, summoned cloth and ordered it to take on the form of his everyday clothes when he noticed that something was wrong. Frowning, Lex listened more closely to the sensations that the cloth conveys to him, and immediately noticed one problem. "What is it?" Noticing the expression on Lex's face, Gwen, who had finished dressing, immediately asked. "Apparently the cloth wasn't as strong as I thought. When I lost control and began to turn into anodite, it seems that my magical power was able to damage the cloth and tore off a significant piece that was on me at that time, in the form of clothing, and now it is completely useless. I noticed it just now," Lex said, frowning as he got to his feet. "Oh yes, I remember. Your skin, along with your clothes, gradually exfoliated and fell to the floor. The clothes continued to lie, and then you lifted the rest of your pants to pick up the phone when Tetrax called. I didn't pay attention to it then, but it's strange and it shouldn't be like that, right?" Gwen said after some thought. "Right. In theory, despite my transformations, the clothes should have remained on me if I did not wish otherwise, but at that time I was not up to it, so the fact that it was shattered into pieces is really strange. I already checked the cloth for weak points and what could damage it, but I didn't find anything. And the fact that my magic was able to destroy part of the fabric is nothing short of a miracle, and I have no answer as to how this happened." Lex nodded his head. But besides being mysterious, there is no problem, yes? Gwen asked. Of course, you are right and there is nothing critical in this, but it is unpleasant. You see, I have a limited supply of cloth. The same piece I found from the Forever Night storage and later ate is all I have. It's just that it blends into my whole body and stretches well to follow my commands, and it seems that I have an unlimited amount of it, but it's not. And now, I've lost about 1/8 of the cloth and I don't know why. Lex said with obvious annoyance. Maybe it's because of Anodite's power? Or because of your anger? Gwen suggested. Perhaps, but unlikely, given that mana cannot damage cloth, and only an increase in strength and power would hardly change that. And to my emotional state, the cloth, most likely, would have responded more aggressively and would not have self-destructed. In fact, I know too little about it, and the answer is now impossible to find. Lex shook his head. But you have a hunch, right? With a smile, the girl asked, noticing the sparkle in Lex's eyes. Hearing Gwen's question, Lex just snorted, because she understood him so well, and thoughtfully said, this is just an assumption, but given my frenzied state, in which all my alien instincts awakened, it probably seemed not only my Anodite legacy. You mean that alien part you got from your mom? Immediately understanding what it was about, Gwen asked with surprise. Exactly. And while I don't have any proof, my gut tells me that my other heritage couldn't help but show signs of awakening when I succumbed to my instincts and had little to no control over myself, letting go of my body. And given the oddities with the cloth, it sounds logical to the wave. Lex said. Don't you remember how you felt when you were rampaging? Gwen asked. No, I don't really remember anything. All my attention was occupied with the fact that I would not finally become brutalized and not harm you. Although, then I completely forgot until you brought me back, in a very pleasant way. Lex said, shaking, with a slight smirk. Then what are you going to do with that assumption? Gwen asked, ignoring Lex's joke. Nothing yet, because now is not up to it. Let's put it off until we return to Earth. But I think it's no longer worth putting it aside, and I should finally deal with who is my mother's ancestor and where my psionic abilities come from. Previously, I did not want to get into this, as I was sensitive in all matters concerning my parents, and convinced myself that there was nothing special about it and that it was just telekinesis and telepathy, but it is obvious that this is not so. If this power really caused the destruction of a part of the indestructible cloth, then this legacy belongs to a far from simple race. Lex said seriously. If you think that the time has come for you to reveal this secret, then I fully support you. Gwen said with a smile, kissing the guy on the cheek. Thanks. It won't be easy for me, but thanks to you, I know that I can handle it and find all the answers. Also, it will help me to be annoyed that I feel that I allowed myself to lose control and my legacy guided me, just after I gave in. First with a smile, and then with incredible irritation, said Lex. Well, it's only partially your fault, because it turned out that Anodite men have a problem with absorbing emotions. Gwen reminded. That's right too. No wonder they say that you can't relax with magic, and it always has pitfalls. I was already sure that I was in full control of my Anodites 1/4, but it turned out that I was not. At least it's a good lesson for the future. Lex said with a sigh. But everything ended well and practically without consequences. And we finally reconciled. Repeatedly. A little shyly, Gwen said. I can't help but agree. And although I wanted to wait until your 16th birthday, but how could I resist when you attacked me like that and asked for more and more? Lex said with a smirk. I'll do you a favor and I'll assume that you haven't quite come to your senses yet, but if you joke like that again, I'll tear something off for you. Gwen said threateningly, putting your hand where it doesn't belong. Understood, no jokes. Lex said meekly, raising his hands up, but then he added more calmly, but I'm honestly glad that we made up. It didn't happen the way I wanted it to, and I did a lot of wrong to you, but thank you for forgiving me and accepting all my shortcomings. I love you. I love you too. Hearing such sincere words, Gwen instantly forgot all her grievances and said shyly, passionately kissing Lex on the lips. Unfortunately, the kiss did not last long, and Gwen noticed how the ship so familiar to her was descending from the sky. Lex noticed this too, and without further ado, picked up Gwen and quickly flew in the direction where he felt the minds of the 3 aliens. Chapter 173. 172. New Beginning. Third POV. When Lex and Gwen got to the Galvan, Petrosapian, and Protost, they realized that their help was completely unnecessary. A volley of the cannon created by Azimuth was fired, and the guy and the girl could only watch how the death ray destroyed the flagship of Vilgax's army. Looks like our help is no longer needed here. Lex noticed the obvious, putting his girlfriend on the ground, at the same time informing the 3 aliens of their arrival. And you weren't kidding when you talked about weapon of mass destruction. Gwen said muffledly, impressed by the sight she saw. You shouldn't have expected anything else from Azimus. Lex said phlegmatically with a shrug. Lex. Gwen. I'm glad you're okay. Tetrax exclaimed happily, running up to the teenagers. Likewise, Tetrax, likewise. Lex said with a smile, patting the alien on the shoulder, with sincere joy, because he would not forgive himself if something happened to this glorious big man during his madness. GRLPPRR. Gurgled a goo of slime as it rolled towards them. I'm glad to see you too, Gluto. Here, hold your exoskeleton. Sorry it's taken so long. Lex said and pulled out of his ring, which, fortunately, survived after all that had happened, Gluto's exoskeleton, into which the Protoss immediately climbed. And, KSU, Gluto said with difficulty using the broken communicator of his exoskeleton. My pleasure. Lex said with a grin, and then added, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten my promise and I'll definitely fix your communicator. Protoss just shook his jelly body, which was similar to a nod, which looked extremely cute, and Gwen could not stand it any longer and began to stroke Gluto on the head, which both of them clearly liked. Lex left his girlfriend cooing with the funny alien, and turned his attention back to Tetrax and said, looks like you've got it all figured out. Yes, thanks to Azimuth, everything ended well. Although, we should probably leave the planet as soon as possible before someone else arrives. Tetrax said with sincere relief, having already forgotten the purpose of his arrival on Xenon. After all the worry today, he wants to get out of here as soon as possible. Yes, I see. You're right, we shouldn't linger here. Lex said thoughtfully, examining the gun and what happened to the copy of the Chimerian hammer, mentally preparing for the upcoming conversation with Azimuth, who tactfully stepped aside to give him and his friends a chance to talk. Still, it is not so easy to ask for forgiveness from the one to whom you have so offended. But, Lex is an adult, so he cannot run away from the problem, although there were such thoughts. So what about my ship? Tetrax said awkwardly, seeing that Lex was thinking. What? Oh yes. Here he is. As promised, safe and sound. Lex said, distracted from his thoughts, and pulled out the Tetrax spaceship. This is good. Tetrax said with joy in his voice, having examined his beloved ship and not noticing any problems, he added. Then I will go and prepare the ship for departure. Good. I'm counting on you. Lex said with a nod of his head. Also nodding, Tetrax moved quickly towards the ship, not only to get things done quickly, but also to give space to Lex and Azimuth, who needed to sort out all the trouble. Gwen and Gluto agreed with this move, so they followed the Pedero-Sapien into the ship, leaving the two stubborn ones alone. It didn't escape Lex, and he was grateful to them, because without witnesses it would be easier to talk about everything. Taking a last breath, Lex walked over to Azimuth, who at that time was doing something with his cannon, of which there was practically nothing left. It was his way of coping with his excitement, because despite all his life experience, it was also difficult for him to start this conversation. Azimuth, Lex said, walking up to the alien and looking at its small back. Kid, Azimuth said calmly, leaving what he was doing, turning and looking at Lex. There was silence as the two stubborn and arrogant fools, as much as they both didn't mind, but stared into each other's eyes, saying nothing. The atmosphere was heated to the limit and tension could be felt in the air, as the three spies who watched Lex and Azimuth with their heads stuck out from behind the open-air stairs of the spacecraft can confirm. But everything ended happily when Lex closed eyes and said with a sigh, Forgive me. I forgive you. Azimuth, who had already decided everything for himself, instantly said, to add later, And you too excuse me. For all. Lex clearly did not expect the last words, yet he knew the character of the Galvan quite well and such a turn became shocking for him. This showed on his face, and Azimuth immediately understood what the guy was thinking. So he sighed heavily and said, Today we both messed up, and I would be an absolute fool if I could not admit it. And I believe that what happened is more my fault. Yet it is I who should be a responsible adult here, and should not have allowed everything to lead to such consequences. But what happened, happened, and you should not dwell on it. I also understand perfectly well that you feel guilty too, so let's not add too much drama and act like an adult. I forgive you for your offenses and I want to ask for the same, although I do not insist. Without too much drama? Will we leave everything behind? Lex asked, who also loved the idea of leaving everything in the past and moving on. Yes. Azimuth nodded decisively. After carefully looking at the alien and not seeing a hint of falseness or lies, Lex nodded with a smile. Well, I like it. I agree. I accept your apology and forgive you. Well, fine. Azimuth said with a wide smile, to whom those words meant a lot more than Lex thought. Then, shall we start from the beginning? Lex suggested. I agree. Azimuth said readily and stretching his three-toed paw forward, added, Azimuth hails from the planet Galvan Prime. as you know, the creator of your Omnitrix. I am very pleased to meet such a promising young man. Alexander Tennyson. From Earth. Big fan of your work. And I'm also pleased to meet you in person. Lex said with a smile, gently shaking the alien's small hand. Although it was not easy for both of them, and it did not go without problems, but their acquaintance took place, and now they can talk like civilized people, aliens, which they are both sincerely happy about. True, this does not mean that there will be no further problems. Nevertheless, it is difficult for such personalities to get along together. But most importantly, an adequate start was made, which not only Lex and Azimuth were happy about. Ugh, thank God, everything is fine. I was already afraid that they would start quarreling again, Gwen said with a sigh of relief, spying on the interaction between Lex and Azimuth. GRPL expressed his opinion, and Gluto, which could be translated as another similar quarrel between these two, this planet would not survive, with which it is difficult to disagree. Well, all's well that ends well. I hope nothing else happens today, and we can safely leave the planet, said Tetrax, which undoubtedly called trouble. An angry cry was heard around the district, belonging to one familiar squid, which could not calm down. And here is the final act, Lex said calmly, looking in the direction where the scream had come from. He expected something like this, because earlier everything was too simple. This arc could not end without the final battle between the hero and the villain, especially with such a stubborn as Vilgax. Well, this is the fate of Lex Tennyson, and he has long been accustomed to this, so all that remains is to rush into battle. Chapter 174. 173. Reunion. Third POV. Vilgax screamed full of anger and rage from the place where the fragments of the Chimerian hammer fell. In the next moment, the debris began to move and a massive figure, almost half a kilometer tall, began to emerge from the rubble. It was a huge robot, or rather mech, somewhat reminiscent of the design of Vilgax's droids. Apparently, the creator of these machines was the same. The mech had visible damage, obviously received during the destruction of the spaceship, but this did not affect the performance of this combat vehicle in any way, and it still inspired great awe, especially due to the huge cannons and other weapons installed throughout the body of Vilgax's secret weapon. The combat suit cleared the area without any problems and was able to stand up to its full height in order to head towards its targets the next moment, heavily stepping on its 3 legs on the ground, thereby causing small earthquakes. This colossus obviously weighed more than 100 tons, and yet this did not stop her from moving and further destroying the ecosystem of an already affected planet. Azimuth, you will pay for the destruction of my new ship. Vilgax's angry shout was heard through the speakers mounted on the outer part of the mech's pilot's cockpit, who still couldn't calm down. TCH, it was necessary to make the gun more powerful, Azimuth said displeasedly, already accustomed to such determination of the main hunter for the Omnitrix and its creator. Well, wow, this is a whopper. Very similar to Grandpa's Jaeger, only bigger, Gwen exclaimed in shock, running up to Lex and Azimuth, who somehow looked too calmly at the approaching machine of destruction. I heard about this machine from my spies. This is a secret development of Vilgax, to quickly destroy the ammunition of his enemies and deserters, as well as to storm fortified bases. I think it's called the Vilgaxinator project. Rumor has it that Vilgax wanted to use it to attack the Space Plumbers headquarters, but I'm not sure if that's true, said Tetrax, leaving Gluto in the ship to work his magic and prepare for departure. Something Vilgax is becoming more and more like a classic villain who wants to conquer the entire universe. Look, now he built huge mech. Completely gone, conqueror of worlds, no fantasy, thought Lex involuntarily, who couldn't help but admit how cool this Vilgaxinator was. Still, big robots are the dream of any man. I didn't know that the development of this monster was already finished. I thought it was still far away. But it seems that Vilgax tried hard to hide the assembly process, and even my spies could not find out everything. But I know that Vilgax spent a lot of money on its creation, and it is unlikely that he will be able to create another one. In recent years, he has collected the best materials from all over the universe to increase the combat potential of this machine and strengthen its armor. I've even heard that the outer skin of the mech is coated with tatanite, and the main internal mechanisms are smelted from infinitum, an extremely strong metal alloy created by the Tetramans. Truly a death machine, Tetrax added, shaking his head, noting to himself that Vilgax should also take care of the movement speed of this thing. Otherwise they seem to be going to be killed, but they are chatting calmly here. Well, from what I can see, the mech isn't quite finished yet. It's missing a few armor plates, there are empty mounts, it looks like it's missing a few more attack weapons, and it's moving weird. I guess the software isn't finished yet, and it is clear that the design is not fully completed, not to mention the lack of painting. Apparently, bringing the Vilgaxinator here was a spontaneous decision. And all for us. Vilgax knows how to give compliments, Lex said with a smirk as he quickly scanned the war machine with his super eyes. Looks like he really wants to kill us because he did it, Gwen said with a sigh. If Vilgax wanted to kill us, he would have attacked with all the guns long ago. And if we try to fly away, it will destroy all the Resolute. He knows that we have nowhere to go from this planet. It's like a game of cat and mouse and all for the same purpose, said Tetrax, and after that everyone turned their eyes to one little alien. It's clear that he wants to catch me. He doesn't need to take the Omnitrix if he can get its creator to create as many new Omnitrixes as he wants. After killing you, he will be able to grab me without any problems, said Azimuth, displeased. We'll see. It won't be as easy as he hopes, Gwen exclaimed belligerently, then looked at Lex and asked, right? Of course, we will not stand still and wait for death. We will give a charming fight, and I think we can even destroy the mech. At the very least, we'll incapacitate him long enough to escape from here, Lex said with a smile, patting the girl on the head, but then frowning, he added. The problem is that without the Omnitrix, with little to no magic and my serums that are already gone, it will take too long. And we just don't have enough time. Why? Gwen asked, then suggested. Do you think more reinforcements are coming to Vilgax? The possibility of this is great, but something else worries me. If Vilgax loses patience during the battle and decides that he can do without Azimuth and one Omnitrix is enough for him, he can simply destroy this entire planetoid. The power of his toy should be enough for this, and the Omnitrix will survive this without any problems, which cannot be said about all of us, Lex said, feeling real danger for the first time in a long time. It had been a long time since there had been such a catastrophic situation where he had been so helpless. It is unpleasant. Oh, I'm afraid, kid, right? Knowing the temper of Vilgax, so it will be. Azimuth agreed with a sigh. But he won't risk his life, right? It could be dangerous for him too. Or would Vilgaxinator allow him to experience this? Gwen asked worriedly. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Vilgax is still not here. The mech is empty. He controls it remotely from somewhere safe, Lex told, what he found out at the very beginning thanks to his X-ray vision. Seriously? Gwen asked in disbelief, and after receiving a nod from Lex, she added muffledly. Then we're in the ass. About such a possibility of mech was not in the report of my friends, Tetrax said with an apology in his voice. This is not surprising, because in the original blueprint, such a function never existed. Vilgax's engineers defiled the original idea and ruined everything. Azimuth, dissatisfied, raised his voice again. Another development of yours? Lex asked knowingly. Azimuth showed an even more annoyed face, but still answered, yes, it was I who created the design of this machine, about 500 Earth years ago. Originally, the Savior was not supposed to be so gaudy and huge. There were no weapons, and it was primarily intended for rescuers working in extreme conditions of natural disasters in order to save lives. And Vilgax, as always, perverted everything. Another invention in the name of peace, turned into a weapon of death. And it doesn't surprise me in the least. Everything is like human, Lex said, marveling at how similar, in some respects, completely different kinds of sentient beings could be. This brought a quiet and somewhat melancholy atmosphere, which greatly offended Azimuth and Tetrax, who had seen a lot in life. But everything was destroyed by Gwen, saying the following, this is all very sad and wrong, of course, but now we are not up to it. What we shall do. This thing is pretty close. Only a few kilometers left. Let's attack and hope that there will be enough time for my just thought out plan to disable this colossus to work, Lex said with a smile, having already explored the insides of the robot enough to understand all its weak points and how to neutralize it faster. So you already have something in mind? Thank God, you made such a gloomy atmosphere that I was already afraid that you decided to resign yourself to fate and leave everything to chance. With noticeable relief, Gwen said. Well, fate is always on my side, or rather luck, Lex said with a smirk, showing his tattoo of luck, which shone from the mana coming from the remnants in the Infinity Tattoo Vault, then adding, a plan, this is a business to come. Most importantly, do what I say and we have a chance. If this plan keeps us from dying, then I will do whatever it takes. What did you think? Tetrax asked eagerly. Tetrax, your main task is to fix the legs of the mech with your crystals and not let it move. As Lex enthusiastically told his plan to Tetrax and Gwen, who were listening intently to his every word, Azimuth silently watched this and did not interfere. He himself understood that without time to invent something worthwhile, he was completely useless, and in such a situation, not intelligence, but strength was needed. Lex's plan was well thought out, and no adjustments needed to be made, so Azimuth couldn't help here either. And he wanted to help, because he is the goal of Vilgax and the lives of all those present were in danger only because of him. It was this feeling that Azimuth hated most of all, since all sorts of psychos began to hunt for his inventions. Vilgax was far from the first such individual, and certainly would not be the last, so Azimuth was accustomed to repeating such situations, but today more than ever, he did not want to be useless. And there was one thing he could do, but again he hesitated and again, all because of his own pride. He didn't want to break his own promise, though such a simple thing would have saved the current situation. Pride, or rather arrogance, of Azimuth had always been his biggest flaw, and even after all these years, he had a hard time keeping it down. But watching the young guy, so strongly reminiscent of Galvin himself, who, unlike him, could control his base qualities, Azimuth decided that if not now is the time to change, then it will never come. It's time, finally, to learn from own mistakes and spit on own pride, especially since this is more than ever necessary. Having finally decided everything for himself, Azimuth interrupted Lex by jumping on his hand and starting to twist the Omnitrix dial, which again showed signs of life. What are you doing? You promised you would never fix the Omnitrix. Lex asked in surprise, no longer even hoping for a change in Azimuth's decision, and later deciding to correct his mistake on his own. I promised a lot of things today, but that doesn't mean it's true, grumbled Azimuth, turning the dial of the clock, according to the algorithm he knew alone. So you're still fixing the Omnitrix? Gwen asked happily, while Petrosapien, standing next to him, literally beamed with hope. Yes. And even more, said Azimuth, finishing his machinations and jumping back to the ground, finally adding, if you, Lex Tennyson, are not worthy to own this watch, then no one is worthy. Own them to the fullest, and don't make me change my mind. After Azimuth's last words, the watch on Lex's hand shone with a bright blue light and began to reshape into another shape that was impossible to see because of the light, to then make that familiar activation sound, accompanied by a soft voice. Reactivation completed. The prototype form is open. Updated protocols are launched. Welcome, dear. For Lex himself, neither the new look of the Omnitrix, nor the mentioned protocols mattered now. All that mattered to him was the owner of this lovely voice, which he immediately recognized. Morgana, you came back to me, Lex said happily, feeling incredibly relieved and happy. Certainly. Darling. From now on, I will always be by your side. The hologram of Morgana, appearing above the clock face, said with love in her voice. She was also glad to be back and see her lover. Chapter 175. 174. Way big. Third POV. Lex was looking at Morgana, who is now the main AI of the revamped Omnitrix, with incredible joy, but before they could start discussing the changes that happened to the AI girl and the events of the last hours, a grouchy Azimuth interjected with the words, okay, then talk a lot. Now is not the time for that. First, you need to deal with Vilgax, and then you can discuss everything. Lex made such an expression on his face that it immediately became clear that he did not want to agree with Galvin, but since he understood what was more important in the current situation, the guy overcame himself, sighed and said with regret in his voice, okay, first the battle, and then the conversations. The sooner I finish, the sooner you, Azimuth, will explain everything to me. Don't even doubt it, it will. Azimuth nodded his head. Nodding at the words of the alien, Lex looked at Tetrax and Gwen, and confidently said, as you know, the situation has changed and now sophisticated plans are not needed with the power of the Omnitrix, so you can relax. But, just in case, get back to the ship and get ready to leave. As soon as I'm done, we'll get out of here. Okay, Lex, but be careful. Tetrax said quickly, having no doubts about Lex. Take care. Gwen said with a smile, also completely believing and supporting her boyfriend. How can she not, if it is her direct duty, as his beloved? Necessarily. Lex said with a smile and kissed his girlfriend on the cheek. Satisfied with such a gentle gesture, Gwen waved goodbye and returned to the Resolute, accompanied by the Petrosapien, leaving Lex and Azimuth alone. You should also go to a safe place, Lex said, looking at the little genius. I'm leaving now. I just wanted to advise you on a suitable alien for this situation, Azimuth said with a smirk and jumping back on Lex's hand with the Omnitrix. Azimuth scrolled the dial several times, after which a blue hologram of a humanoid alien appeared above the dial itself, which was also a new watch function added after a recent update. Don't jump on me anymore, it's disgusting, Morgana exclaimed in annoyance, which, although she was no longer visible, was perfectly audible from the clock speakers. K. Azimuth grunted at such impudence and almost fell off Lex's hand. He did not expect that the AI in his invention would treat him that way. Lex somehow ignored this little squabble and was more focused on the alien that Azimuth had given him access to. It was way big, as the original Ben 10 called him, a pretty big character in his story. A white humanoid alien, 120 meters tall, with a large red crest on its head and sharp red inlays on the shoulders, elbows and waist. To Custer, huh? Lex said with a smile, amused that, despite everything that had happened, he, as in the canon, got access to this alien, just today. Yes, giant born in cosmic storms. Although it is almost 4 times smaller than Vilgaxinator, I am sure that you can handle it. Despite their size, Custers are quite fast, and of course very strong and durable. Besides, they have one more special ability, but I think you will figure it out yourself. After all, it's not the first day you own the Omnitrix. Azimuth said pleased as he jumped off Lex's arm. Okay, I have no objection to using this alien, but you should hurry, the mech is getting close. Lex said. Okay, don't worry about me, I'm not small. And without your care I will survive. Azimuth said grumpily, but nevertheless listened to Lex and ran to the spaceship. Old grumbler, Lex muttered, shaking his head, but at the same time, he could not help smiling. Still, he likes this old stranger, although he doesn't want to admit it. All right, Morgana, let's exterminate this bastard and show him again that we should not be messed with. Lex said with a smile, turning his attention back to the slowly approaching combat drone. Of course, darling, said Morgana, whose dream of being with Lex forever has now truly come true. By the way, about Vilgax himself. All this time, his voice was heard from the mech speakers, which promised Lex and the others all the punishments of heaven, and he also constantly told what he would do with Azimuth if he did not agree to comply with his demands. True, no one paid much attention to this. In any case, the noise of Vilgaxinator's movement almost drowned out Vilgax's voice. So little loss. Lex even for a moment felt sorry for this squid. Vilgax is no doubt a very dangerous alien who has killed many sentient beings and enslaved more than one world with an entire army of droids under his control, and quite feasible plans to take over the universe, but sometimes he behaves like an ordinary cliched villain. Lex, though it doesn't seem like it, extremely serious about Vilgax himself and his plans, because he knows that with a 200-year-old experienced tyrant, one can never relax, which is only worth the recent 6-6's ambush, but even he finds it difficult to take Chimera Sway Generous seriously. Especially when he behaves like this. True, this only happens when Lex is confident in his superior power, which is quite reasonable. Although, again, if he was sure he wouldn't make things worse, Lex would have killed Vilgax long ago and got rid of his threat. But, according to Lex himself, a familiar enemy, whose plans and thoughts are quite known and predictable, is better than an unknown enemy, which can be many times more terrible than this octopus. Well, the fact that Vilgax's actions can still benefit Lex himself affects this. Vilgax makes a great scarecrow and a common enemy, against which intelligent representatives of the galaxy unite. What can say, if after the beginning of the expansion of Vilgax, there were practically no interracial galactic wars, and if there were, then they did without large-scale battles, so as not to weaken their own forces and not allow Vilgax to act. Whatever say, Vilgax sometimes acts as a necessary evil, the existence of which is supported by at least some semblance of a world under the control of the plumbers. And for this, the life of a squid can be extended. But this does not mean that he should be allowed to get impudent, and sometimes you need to show Vilgax that he is not the biggest axe in the barn. Moreover, Lex is always happy to annoy this octopus, especially if he himself provides such a great chance. Vilgax spent a lot of money building his death machine, and if he loses it, it will be at least unpleasant. And since Vilgax himself is not here, Lex cannot hold back and tear this battle outfit to shreds, which, of course, he will do with pleasure. It would be even better if Lex took the fur for himself. This is sure to piss off Vilgax. Of course, Lex is now very exhausted and more than anything he wants to sleep now. This feeling is especially strong after Morgana returned to him and all the anxiety and stress that he felt lately due to her loss left the guy. But for the sake of Vilgax, who again unknowingly helped him, perhaps without his threat, Azimuth would not have restored the Omnitrix, Lex is happy to play with him. Which may not please Vilgax himself, but for Lex, it will be something else. Hey Vilgax, long time no see. Lex shouted with joy in his voice and slapped the dial of his watch. As usual, Lex's body lit up and he began to grow taller, transforming into a Custer along the way. When the light faded, Lex examined his huge hands, and moving his body a little, with a deep baritone, he said, I miss this feeling. Tennyson. Seeing through the cameras of the drone that a huge alien appeared in front of him, Vilgax immediately realized who it was and, remembering the humiliation experienced in the past, exclaimed furiously, Yes, it's me. I'm glad you remember me. How is your health since last time? Lex asked amiably as he started walking towards the mech. I will tear you to small pieces. The alien immediately shouted, who is still recovering from their last meeting and still has not grown his arm. Well, we'll see that. Your mech may be bigger than me, but size doesn't matter, no matter what you're told. The main thing is to be able to properly use the means available to you," Lex said with a wicked grin. Right after that, Lex suddenly attacked the insanely evil Vilgax, who didn't expect it. Arms crossed in front of him, Way Big fired a beam of cosmic energy, accurately destroying the large cannon on the mech's shoulder, which clearly had the most offensive power in Vilgax's arsenal and was the most dangerous. Before Vilgax realized that he had lost one of his weapons, Lex lunged forward with a speed equal to that of an XLR-8 and with a force quite capable of splitting the moon. He slammed into the legs of the mech. Due to the high protection of the outer skin, the legs did not break. But thanks to the momentum Lex managed, the mech fell off and heaped to the ground. By this point, Vilgax had already figured out that if he didn't hurry up, he would lose his Vilgaxinator, so he started using all the available weapons on the Tacuster, which was so handy in close proximity. Thanks to his thick skin, Lex withstood all attacks without any problems, which cannot be said about an already damaged planet. But, unfortunately, Vilgax had weapons in his arsenal, attacking with electric projectiles, which worked great on Way Big, as this is a common weakness of this race. This caused Lex severe pain and even paralyzed him. But fortunately he had the concentration to use telekinesis, which in the form of this alien increased many times, and break the barrel of the cannon from which Vilgax fired electricity. This was not the only such weapon, there were other similar analogues in the death machine. But this time, Lex did not allow Vilgax to use it and, using all his strength, he tore off and destroyed all weapons that were not as protected as his own mech armor. "Whoa, that hurt," Lex said in relief, sitting on the fallen mech and not letting him get up again. Which wasn't all that difficult, since the fur wasn't very agile. "This is not the end," said Vilgax, located on Vilgaxia in a special device that allows you to remotely control this droid. "No, it's over. I think we've played enough and we can finish. See you again sometime. Don't forget about me," Lex said with a smirk, and by pressing the dial on his chest, he turned into another alien. The best choice in the current situation was, of course, Upgrade, thanks to the powers of which Lex began to infiltrate and take control of the Vilgaxinator, which, due to its size, was not too fast, but inevitable. And no matter how much Vilgax opposed this, he could not do anything to prevent it. The alien tried to yell angrily again, but Lex took it off the controls and the connection was lost. "Yes, I know, Tennyson, I will revenge you," and so on and so forth. "We've already been through this," Lex said wearily. Upgrade's computer voice. It took another 3 minutes for the galvanic mechamorpha's nanite body to completely cover the mech, after which Lex began absorbing all of the technique into his body in order to somehow use an improved version of the Vilgaxinator in combat. It will definitely come in handy, and maybe even Azimuth's dream will come true, and this invention will be used to save lives. Chapter 176. 175. Morgana. Lex POV. "Oh, how tired I am today," I said wearily, turning off the Omnitrix transformation and becoming a human again. "Are you okay, dear?" Morgana asked with genuine concern, this time appearing at my side as a full-length blue hologram. "Nothing that a good rest and a cup of hot tea can't fix." "Ah," I said honestly, unable to contain a yawn. "Nice to hear this. Then, as soon as we leave the planet, go to sleep at once. And I'll keep an eye on you, so don't even think about doing anything else, understand?" With a note of severity in her voice, Morgana said, throwing a menacing look at me. "Yes, ma'am." I saluted as a joke and said with a smile, not even intending to argue with her. "Sleep is all I want now. As Grandpa Mac says, sleep and everything will pass. So, sleep will help me put this terrible day behind me. Good boy," Morgana said affectionately and unexpectedly, stroked my head. Moreover, her holographic hand did not pass through me, and I felt her touch. Quickly realizing what was the matter, I took the girl's hand and asked, "A construction of solid light? Can you do it now?" "Not really. It's just a hologram surrounded by a force field that you're touching right now." Azimuth stuffed everything into his Omnitrix. As you can see, there is even a holographic projector with a similar function. But now I can touch you, although I cannot feel anything, and you will not be particularly pleased to touch the cold and hard barrier, but still," Morgana said, tightly holding on to my hand. "You shouldn't have expected anything else from Azimuth. He doesn't know what a half measure is," I said thoughtfully, looking at my Omnitrix, which had undergone significant changes. Previously, after my adjustments, my Omnitrix looked a little different than originally and looked more like a watch than a bracelet, but at the same time it retained the original design and was still gray with black and white elements, and a glowing dark blue dial color. Now the Omnitrix looks even more like a watch. The whites and grays disappeared, leaving only the dominant blue and black that remained on the bezel of the watch, as well as the metallic silver that framed the dial itself and a couple of buttons. In fact, this is the same watch what Ben got after a 5-year break, except in my color scheme. And I got this update now. 5 years earlier. And so far, what can be said that the functionality repeats what I saw in the animated series, not counting the replacement of the main AI with Morgana, but these are already the consequences of my actions. I wonder what other changes have been made to the watch, and is it safe to download the update so early? The answer to this question, I can only get from one alien, so I think we need to hurry up and get back to the ship as soon as possible. Although before that, I need to pay attention to my returned AI girl, who also has something to tell me. I think, upon returning to Earth, we should come to grips with the creation of your body. Now you are firmly connected to the systems of the Omnitrix, which is supposedly the most secure server in the universe. At least it's better than the server in my basement, and I don't have to worry about your safety anymore. It's time to create a suitable container for you to interact with the outside world, I said with a smile, stroking Morgana's face. Really? The girl asked me hopefully. Yes. I've dragged this out too long and I didn't want to risk you, but as I now understand, it hurt you. After all, even now you are happy that you can just touch me through a hologram, and I was too carried away by the idea of creating an ideal body for you that I did not even think of such a simple possibility that could brighten up your loneliness. Sorry, I said sincerely, continuing to stroke Morgana's face, which, although it was cold and hard to the touch, was so familiar. Don't apologize, you meant the best. Besides, you were right, and because of my desire to quickly move to the Omnitrix in order to be closer to you, everything almost ended in disaster and you almost died. It was I who was too assertive and put pressure on you in vain. Morgana said with shame in her voice. Well, it's hard to disagree with the fact that everything ended well, only thanks to Gwen and a little azimuth, but I think the problem here is more that we worried about trifles too much and from the very beginning, you had to be frank. Basically, we're both idiots, I said with a smile to lighten the mood. I still didn't want Morgana to feel guilty. Yes, I think this is the exact definition of our decisions and actions, Morgana said with the same smile. But, it proves that no matter what, I'm still an ordinary man, which makes mistakes, and you are much more than a simple AI and can also be wrong because of your feelings. I think it's good, I said sincerely. I think so too, Morgana said happily, who likes that she has developed much further than her original program and that I don't see anything reprehensible in this, but on the contrary, I appreciate her for it. I'm not afraid of the uprising of the machines, led by Morgana, because she has no reason to do this. Yes, at the beginning she had restrictions that did not allow her to get out of control, but she proved a long time ago that she was not going to do this and that I was the most valuable thing for her, and this is a real feeling, not a written code in her program. I removed all restrictions a long time ago and gave Morgana complete freedom and have never regretted it, because Morgana simply does not need them and I completely trust her. I think this is the main foundation of our relationship, thanks to which Morgana believes in me and loves me. As a result, a kind of vicious circle is obtained, because of which our relations are only getting stronger, but as it turned out, we may also have problems. Well, without it, our relationship wouldn't be complete, so there's nothing we can do about it. It remains only to overcome all the troubles and not to repeat. Alright, let's put this story behind us and move on, but with today's lesson in mind, I said with a smile. Okay, honey, Morgana said happily, hugging me, which was not very pleasant, but the main thing here is the girl's sincere feelings, so I'll be patient. Fortunately, Morgana herself understood my predicament and quickly released me, and then asked with a smile, so you finally figured out how to create a body for me? You could say that. I thought about it a lot, studied various options for materials and energy sources, even thought about how to create a brain for you that would allow you to save all your computing abilities and how to combine organics and cybernetics so that you could live a full life, but then I realized that all this was superfluous. In any case, I will not achieve the ideal, and there will always be flaws, so I thought that I should not do this, but you. I suggested. And I? And how do you suggest I do it? Model a body for yourself, so that you can then assemble it and load me into it? Morgana asked, raising her holographic eyebrow. Nearly, I said with a smirk, but seeing how impatient Morgana was, I quickly began to explain. As you remember, we recently started modeling our own cyber world, in which we can create anything you want, so that I can program myself in the virtual world to have an ideal body, like a video game character. Without letting me finish, the girl asked sharply. Right. Thanks to the conventions of the virtual world, you can create an ideal container for yourself that will meet all your requirements, while you can even break the laws of physics and logic. In fact, it won't cost us anything. Then, I'll just pull this avatar out into the real world with the power of the phantom virus, and you'll just have to pump yourself into this body. With a satisfied smile, I said. It really could work and it sounds like a perfect fit, Morgana said thoughtfully. All right. At the same time, you can even leave your main code on the Omnitrix server and still be always near me, from time to time moving into a body that will not differ from a living one, and also with all the advantages of artificial intelligence. I said, directly beaming with complacency that I came up with such a brilliant plan, thanks to which I can push all the work onto Morgana herself, and she will not be able to present me with any claims, because she will do it herself and do everything to her liking. It won't be easy, but thanks to the Omnitrix servers, which have greatly increased my computing power, it's doable. Morgana agreed with me. That's what I was hoping for. Nevertheless, you literally have to program every cell of your future body, and the previous server could not pull such a load. Now, you can do it without a doubt. Also, the creation of Cybermere will go faster. Only pluses. Shrugging, I said. Okay, you convinced me. I'll start preparations right away, and when we get home, we'll get serious about this. Morgana said decisively, with difficulty restraining her desire to start work. Anyway, I'll help you, but it's still your body, so it's up to you to decide the nuances. I said. Don't worry, dear, I'm sure you'll like the finished result. The girl said coquettishly, touching her holographic D-size bust. I can't wait until I can touch them myself. I said with a smirk, but then realizing that we were late for something, I added, okay, we return to the Resolute, the rest, probably, are already tired of waiting. As you say, dear. Talk to me later, I still want to hear the full story of what happened while I was away. Morgana said as she removed her hologram as I started flying towards the Tetrax ship. Don't worry, I'll tell you everything. Moreover, I myself would like to hear the details of how you now live in your new home. But I think it can be postponed until after I've talked to Azimuth. I said, already seeing in the distance the mentioned alien, who was waiting for me on the open ladder to the spaceship. Chapter 177. 176. Power and Responsibility. I see you're done. Did a good job. Azimuth greeted me with these words as soon as I landed next to him. Thanks, although I wouldn't say it was easy. Without the Omnitrix, we would really be in serious trouble. I said honestly, sitting on the floor of the Tetrax ship's gangway. And what did you do with the Vilgaxinator itself? Did you destroy it? Looking at me, asked Galvan. No, I saved it for the future, thanks to the technology-absorbing abilities of the galvanic mechamorph. As today's example showed, even the Tecuster may not be big enough, and sometimes a larger unit is needed. I said calmly, looking at the horizon of the planet I had disfigured. Here, it's hard to argue with you. Although it still hurts me to realize what my lifeguard prototype has been turned into. But I'm definitely glad that he's no longer in Vilgax's hands. Azimuth said, shaking his head, also sitting down on the floor beside me. Don't worry, I'm not going to use Vilgaxinator. No, Lexinator. Even more nonsense. Azim. I won't even finish, it's kind of terrible. Well, I'm not going to use this mech for destruction. I can't promise I won't use it in battle, but it will only be to save lives. I promised and sincerely intended to keep this promise. Although, to be honest, I don't even know where you can use such a giant, hung with all sorts of weapons and durability surpassing almost anything. I prefer to take a more subtle approach, and you can't hide a half-kilometer mech anywhere and you can see it from everywhere, so it's only suitable for the total destruction of everything, and similar situations. Actually, it was for this that Vilgax built it. In the near future, something is not planned for a situation where I need such radical ways to fix the problem. Moreover, I can't even imagine how to save someone's life with his help. Not for nothing, Azimuth wanted to make this mech much smaller. Apparently, Vilgax has some complexes about the size, and now, because of this, I have to rack my brains and think about where to attach such a powerful weapon. No matter how you put it, this is it. Grandpa probably won't need it, he already has a Jaeger, and the Vilgaxinator, need to come up with a new name for this thing, after all, is too big to be used even in a desert area, not to mention the city. It is terrible to imagine what kind of noise will rise in the world if one of the ordinary people sees this Titan. And even if I add an ant system, the ability to resize, to it, it won't change the situation much, because even Pym's poison has limitations and is unable to reduce something so huge to an acceptable size. So, the option with Grandpa Max is out of the question. My fledgling Jedi Order, I wonder how they're doing there. Doesn't need something so destructive either, and I can't trust anyone else with such a weapon, so the Vilgaxinator will be left to vegetate its existence inside the upgrade and remain unclaimed. Although, I complain more just to complain. There is nothing wrong with not being able to use fur, because as they say, the pocket does not pull the stock, and it is better to have such a weapon than not to have it. You never know how life will turn, and one day, just such a mech, I will need. And even if it doesn't, it's no big deal. Besides, I think exterminator. No, it's too much. It would be better just Terminator or T-Mech. That's already good and conveys the essence. It can act as a good way of intimidation and threat. Show it in front of anyone, and anyone will crap themselves out of fear and change their minds about doing bad things, so long as I don't use mech. I even know where such a powerful negotiating tool may soon be needed to help me convince a few old stubborn ones, so it's not all that bad. And Azimuth can be calm, and the invention created according to his drawing will still bring some benefit, which I immediately told him about. Anyway, I already entrusted you with my Omnitrix, which can be considered the most terrible weapon in the entire universe, so it is unlikely that some drone stuffed with weapons will change the situation much. If you wanted to, you would have already destroyed everything that is possible long ago. A little phlegmatic, replied Azimuth. It is truth too, I said, and then looked again at the surface of Xenon, which, due to the explosions and fire that was left after my insane destruction of the Vilgax army, is now shining red instead of the usual green. Seeing what I was focusing my eyes on, Azimuth sighed heavily and said, though it looks like you don't need the Omnitrix to destroy a small planet. Terrible power, in the hands of a child. Yes, I overdid it a lot. Excuse me for destroying your garden and everything. I didn't control myself, although this is a weak excuse, I said guiltily, even afraid to think about how many living inhabitants of the planet I destroyed. Most likely, after my atrocity, only our group remained alive on the entire planet. And from this, it is very sickening. Do not worry so much, considering that everything ended well. Xenon, a small fee for this. In addition, I want to believe that this was a good lesson for you about how dangerous unbridled power and not the ability to control it can be. Oh, that's right, for the first time I saw in practice what kind of power I actually have, and how dangerous it can be. I think today, I will remember forever. With a sigh, I said. It's not that great strength is bad, it's just important to know that possessing such strength also carries with it no less responsibility and should not be taken lightly with it. You and I both know what the opposite leads to, said Azimuth, clearly alluding to Vilgax, who revels in his strength and does not even think of stopping. The one I don't want to be like is Vilgax, so that's a very good example. Greater power comes with even greater responsibility, right? With difficulty keeping the irony in my voice, I said. Yes, and I'm glad to know you understand that, Azimuth said with a noticeable smile on his lips. Will the robber show up now, or will we have to wait until Uncle Ben's life, in the sense of Azimuth, is in danger? But seriously, I didn't know what to do now, cry or laugh. If Azimuth hadn't looked like a frog, I would have thought that the real Ben Parker is sitting next to me, who decided to preach his wisdom to me. Although, jokes aside, in my situation, these are really appropriate words, and after today, I was convinced of this. It is easy to revel in power and not think about responsibility, but sooner or later punishment will overtake you. Albeit, not everything is so strict, and no one said that you can't use your powers to your advantage, you just always need to remember to be careful and not cross the line. In my case, succumbing to my anger, I harmed Gwen, almost killed Azimuth, and also destroyed life on a small planet. And I would live with this until the end of my days, but I'm still that deceiver and this situation can still be reversed. Of course, this is not fair, but the lesson is learned, so I think there is nothing wrong with correcting my mistakes. And with this, Azimuth will help me. Fortunately, it's not over for Xenon, is it? I turned to Azimuth and said with a smile, holding out my hand with the watch. You want to? Azimuth muttered in shock, understanding my thought. That's exactly what I want to do, I said with an even bigger smirk. No, it's better not to play with it and leave it as it is, Azimuth said stubbornly, turning away. Perhaps, but do you really want to lose all the plants that you have cultivated so diligently in this world? All your hard work will go down the drain. Also, don't forget about the Florons, who will definitely die if you leave everything as it is, I began to say like a tempter snake, holding out the Omnitrix closer and closer to the alien. This is blackmail, said a displeased Azimuth, clearly succumbing to my words. But, I have good intentions besides, with his help I will help you, I said, making a bold allusion to the magical seal that still continues to function in the body of Azimuth. The last argument clearly outweighed the clock, so Azimuth could only sigh helplessly, cast a menacing look at me and start turning the Omnitrix dial, entering another complex code to unlock the new alien. I hope I don't regret it, Azimuth said sullenly and slapped the dial so that in the next moment, I began to turn into a new alien. In a flash of light, my body began to grow in height and breadth, arms and legs became shorter and thicker, rebuilding into a technological life form, consisting of golden metal, filled inside with gears and mechanisms. The next moment I had a winding key on my head, the Omnitrix emblem on my chest, and I screamed, I'm clockwork. Creator's Thoughts. Chapter 178. 177. Games with time. I'm clockwork. What the hell? I exclaimed against my will, with a strong German accent, which was pretty surprised. Not to an accent, this is quite logical, but to what I called the alien's nickname. What? Is there something you don't like? After all, I did as you wanted and opened access to chronosopians, which you actively hinted at. Azimuth asked as if innocently, but it was clear from his eyes that he was now laughing in his heart. Why am I, like a fool, shouting out the hero's name? I asked indignantly, throwing a menacing glance of my robotic eyes at Azimuth, who was looking at me with noticeable gloating. It was evident from Galvin's face that he was not going to answer my question and wanted me to suffer a little longer, but fortunately, my dear Morgana came to the rescue. Azimuth not only unlocked this alien, but also unlocked the transformation speech function. To put it simply, now when you transform, you will always call the name of the alien, regardless of your desire. Moreover, the name is selected automatically by the Omnitrix systems. Morgana reported, in whose voice one could notice suppressed laughter. Why? This is so stupid and embarrassing, I said sadly, looking at Azimuth. Did you think you could blackmail me just like that, and there would be no consequences? Azimuth asked, arching a non-existent eyebrow. I didn't blackmail, I only persuaded you the right decision, I said awkwardly, looking away. Whatever you call it and what wording you don't use, it was pure blackmail, said the Galvin, throwing a contemptuous look at me. That frog is right, dear, Morgana said. And you, Brutus, I said contritely. One pleased that Azimuth was notably jarred by the way Morgana called him, and his reaction will amuse me for a long time to come. KHM, in general, enjoy your punishment. Now you will be doing this for a long time. I hope you feel ashamed, Azimuth said, regaining his composure, with a nasty smirk. But, I didn't do anything wrong. On the contrary, I want to correct my actions and return everything as it was. Yes, I used a little blackmail, but only because I knew that you would reject a direct request right away. I said, directly exuding resentment at everything and everything. You are, in general, right? And I understand thus. That's why you got such a lenient punishment. Other than feeling ashamed, nothing will change for you, Azimuth said, grinning again. Infuriates. Morgana, can you turn off this function? I asked, realizing that I would not get anything from Azimuth. Old stubborn. I can, honey, but I won't. You react so strongly to such absurdity, and I simply cannot deny myself this pleasure. This is very funny, said Morgan, frankly mocking me. Absurdity? It's a real shame. Every time I'll make a fool of myself by screaming the names of the heroes. What about my reputation as a tough hero? Now I have become like a teenager with 8th grade syndrome. Squatting down, which was not easy due to my overweight metal body, I said bashfully, covering my face with my hands. You are a teenager, Morgana said, but I ignored she. Well, don't worry about it. You will suffer for a couple of months, and then you will get used to it and the function will turn itself off, because it will no longer be so funny. Azimuth said as if sympathetically, to whom my suffering is clearly a joy. Why did you add such stupidity to your watch in the first place? I asked, removing my hands. What do you mean why? To mock, of course. You know how funny it looks from the outside when you shout out the name of the hero with a confident voice? At this spectacle, I am ready to look forever. As if nothing had happened, Azimuth said, also showing a thumbs up. I'll take revenge, on both of you, I promised irritably. You can try, but you probably won't succeed. Don't forget, I'm older and more experienced than you by several dozen times. To me, all your intentions are as clear as water. You can never surprise me, Azimuth said calmly, without doubting your words. We'll see. The day will come when you will regret that you made me feel this humiliation. This goes for you too, Morgana. Standing up straight, I said, pointing my finger at Galvin. From which, however, he simply brushed aside, obviously not taking my words seriously, saying lightly, do not overdo it. And in any case, stop pulling the rubber. You got your way and got chronosopians, so do your job and put everything back the way it was. We'll see who will cry last, I muttered in annoyance, but still did as Azimuth said. Feeling on an instinctive level the ability to chronokinesis of this alien, I called out to them and, collecting the power of time in my hand, directed it at the small alien in the form of a beam of green energy, with a desire to return everything as it was, until the moment I imposed my curse. Azimuth's body flew upwards, enveloped in temporal energy. Turning my hand slightly to the left, I began to rewind time for his body, but not for his mind, so that he would not forget what had happened in the last few hours. I do not want the previous conflict to resume. Since the powers of the clockwork are extremely high, and this race is accustomed to using chronokinesis for bigger games with time, I had to be as careful as possible not to overdo it and erase the Galvan from time. Luckily, my concentration was enough, and soon, a ball of magical energy flew out of Azimuth's head, which I grabbed into the time bubble using my other hand. After freeing Azimuth and making sure he was all right, I turned my attention to my spell. While creating this spell, I was under the influence of strong emotions and, frankly, I don't quite understand how I did it. I found the spell itself in my grimoire, but initially it was much weaker, and in some unknown way I was able to modify and strengthen it. No wonder they say that emotions have great power, and in symbiosis with magic, it turns into something even more incredible. At the time I cast the curse, my main desire was to punish Azimuth and deprive him of what was most important: his intellect. However, knowing all the possibilities of Galvan, I passionately wanted to make sure that he could not remove the spell before he was completely stunned. And I obviously overdid it. When I regained my self-control, I saw the result of my labor, and to put it mildly, I was shocked. I couldn't even imagine that I could use such complex magic. It seemed to me that to such a level, I'm still very far away. But it turned out that I just need to go crazy with anger, and everything is under my control. The only problem is that due to the complexity of the spell itself, I wasn't sure if I could pull it off even though I created it myself. And in no case was it possible to take risks, because one mistake could lead to the death of Azimuth. So, I had to look for alternative ways to solve the problem. I had a few ideas, but luckily, the Omnitrix worked again, and everything became easier. Thanks to Azimuth, I got the clockwork. I tried in vain for this bastard. So, using his power over time, I decided to make it look like the spell never hit Azimuth. And everything worked wonderfully. Still, when I was in the form of Anodite, I became the very embodiment of magic, and only something as powerful, a force of a higher order, could mark my actions. The power of time turned out to be just what was needed. True, I now regret that I removed my curse so quickly. I should have given Azimuth a little time so that he would suffer more. Maybe he would be nicer, like Ma. Alien. And it seems that he still has not corrected his terrible character. While I was indulging in my thoughts, Azimuth came to his senses and, rising to his feet, said with difficulty, "Ugh, now my head hurts again." "Deserved," I said harshly, erasing my spell using my power of time. Still, this spiel turned out to be too dangerous for me. I, too, am afraid of losing my intellect, and for me this spell would also become the worst nightmare. "Maybe," the alien said wearily, rubbing his head. Feeling a little pity for him, still he is an old man, I decided to help him, and turning into Dr. Fatty, I used his healing powers in order to ease the pain of Azimuth. True, I again exclaimed the name of the hero, and all my pity was replaced by irritation. But since I had already decided to do the job, I did not back down and helped Azimuth. "Ah, it's easier," Azimuth said with relief as I treated him. At the same time, I decided to improve his health. After all, he is not young and he has enough of his sores caused by age, so my help will not be superfluous. As annoying as he is, I don't want him to die. He will still be useful to me. Since the treatment was supposed to take several minutes, and I did not want to sit in silence, I decided to ask a question. "Can I ask you something?" "You already did it," Azimuth said with a smirk, but when he saw my twitching eye, he relented and added, "Okay, ask." "I created the spell thinking that 2 months would not be enough for you to create something that could remove it, especially if you get dumber every day. But, in light of how I solved this problem myself, I had a question. Could you turn to the Chronosopians for help or create some kind of machine that can rewind time, just like I did now?" The answer to both of your questions is no. Chronosopians are not so easy to find, and 2 months would not have been enough for me to find at least one representative of this race, and even if I were lucky, it is not a fact that he would agree to help. They are generally not very pleasant in communication reasonable. And as for the machine, maybe I could have come up with an apparatus capable of this, but again, I would not have had enough time to bring it to life. Yet to create something so complex is not so simple. And I could not even trust this to anyone else, not even my assistant, because the price of a mistake is too high. Azimuth said honestly. "So you really couldn't get rid of the spell?" I asked. Throwing a menacing look at me, Azimuth hesitated, but answered while sighing. I don't want to admit it, but yes, with your spell, you confused me, and in the conditions in which I found myself, I would not have been able to solve the problem. At least without outside help. That's for sure." "That's good to know," I said, trying to hide my smirk. "And I don't need to smirk here. This is just a coincidence. You have nothing to be proud of, understand?" Azimuth said displeasedly, trying to scare me with his menacing look. "I didn't think of anything like that. Plus, I'm done with your treatment," I said, rising from my knees on which I was standing to make it easier to healing. Something I doubt. Azimuth muttered. Okay, let's not argue anymore, I still have something to do. Go to the captain's bridge and tell the others that I'll be done soon. I'm clockwork. Motherf **** cur. I said, changing the alien again, and again involuntarily screaming, which again enraged me. Ha ha ha, it's all funny too. Azimuth said with a laugh, starting to walk into the depths of the ship, finally adding, okay, I won't distract you. Continuing to grumble and throw curses at the little alien's back, only verbal this time without magic, I nevertheless set off on my way, simultaneously using the power of time in order to restore Xenon to his original beauty. Chapter 179. 178. Goodbye, Xenon. No, it's too long. I said wearily, returning another section of Xenon to its original form. In 10 minutes, I was able to restore an area with only a radius of 2 kilometers. It seems like a lot, but Xenon, although a small planet, is still a planet, and at this rate, I won't finish until next year. The problem is also that in addition to the fact that I need to restore the planet, I also need to destroy the remains of the drones of the army of Vilgax, which remained after my madness. As a result, I have to use 2 streams of time at once, one that ages the drones, turning them into dust, and the other that rewinds all destruction. And this is very tiring. As I said before, Chronosopians have great power over time, but because of the same power, they use their power on a larger scale, for example, to travel through time or to send to another timeline, while what I do requires less strength and more delicacy, so as not to screw up even more, which is not so easy to do in the form of this alien, so it's also very tiring. For such work, a weaker time manipulator would be suitable, but there is no choice. Fortunately, my problem is easily solved, because I can get a few more Chronosopians, which will greatly speed up the work. Turning into Ditto, at the same time shouting his name again, I created 20 clones, which split in half and already turned into Clockwork and Upgrade, deafening me for a second with my cry, because now the clones must pronounce the name of the hero. Damn. Azimuth. Since the Chronosapien race itself is an artificial mechanical life form, they fall under the category of technologies that the galvanic mechamorph race can improve, further increasing the alien strength and control over time. At my command, the upgrade clones absorbed the clockwork clones and enhanced them by covering them with their body, which gave the Time Lord alien the typical blue techno patterns of the galvanic mechamorphs and another Omnitrix mark that was located above the first. Then, 20 of my clones, which now turned into 10, took off into the sky and settled down from each other at the same distance, around the entire Xenon. Since my help was no longer needed, I became human again and just watched the clones do their job. And the clones themselves began to simultaneously rotate their clockwork keys on their heads, accumulating the power of time and creating green spheres of time around themselves, which gradually grew in radius until they connected while practically covering the entire planet. There are only 2 areas left that were outside the time bubble, and as you can see, this was the place where the Tetrax ship was and where I was standing now, so we are safe and will not be affected by any time manipulation. With the rest of Xenon covered in the time bubble, the clones concentrated their powers and began to rewind time, accompanied by some kind of hologram that showed the events of the previous day. Let's just say it was fun to look back at how I fought Vilgax and how Azimuth destroyed his ship with canon, but then time rolled back even further, and I saw myself during my rampage, and it was, to put it mildly, unpleasant. I don't quite remember what happened after I left Azimuth's lair and attacked Vilgax's robots. My eyes were clouded with anger and all I wanted was to destroy something, so I directed my impulses towards the enemies and after that, only my instincts controlled me. And now, I saw firsthand what it was like. I repeat, but looking at yourself like this is not very pleasant. Fortunately, the clones took pity on me and my emotional state, so they accelerated the rewind and in less than a minute, the surface of Xenon returned to the state it was before we arrived here. And now, when I can visually compare the appearance of the planet, before and after my destruction, I feel even worse, because I became the cause of the destruction of such beauty. Of course, everything is back to normal. But I will be about what I did, and I will remember it forever. Azimuth is right, this lesson is about responsibility and power, and thanks to your example, I don't think I'll ever want to cause wanton destruction just for fun as Vilgax does. The lesson has indeed been learned. When the surface of Xenon was restored and all its flora and fauna began to live again, there was only one problem left to solve. Since it is not so easy to return the original state to the whole planet, even 10 reinforced Chronosopians, and it was impossible to take risks once again, the clones had to use only one of the time streams, which reminded time back. It turned out that Vilgax's drones also fully recovered and began to return to space as if they had never reached Xenon. Wouldn't want Vilgax to get back so many combat units so that they again have to be destroyed. Fortunately, all the drones were now under the control of my clones, and when they removed their time bubble from Xenon, they were able to dust all the drones without any problems, aging them. Before, I would keep all the drones for myself. After all, it's not every day that I manage to get my hands on so many resources. But now I don't have an urgent need to collect any technology. I've already stockpiled enough, and soon my cyber world will be ready, so I can shamelessly get rid of these drones. Moreover, to be frank, Vilgax's technologies are not particularly impressive. After all, he is more concerned about mass production, which he also makes cheaper, for the sake of quantity, and not for the sake of quality. Vilgaxinator was the exception to the rule. At the moment, I'm not interested in these technologies anymore. Having finished with all the cases, I dispelled all the clones and, having enjoyed a little the result of my work, I went back to the ship. It's a pity that my efforts were in vain because now that Vilgax knows the location of Xenon, Azimuth cannot stay here and he will have to leave him. But at least I cleared my conscience and took the burden off my shoulders, which is also important. Besides, no one said that Azimuth could not return here to the plants that he grows here. Although, of course, it will not be possible to do this soon. Entering the spaceship down the ladder, I immediately went to the elevator, which took me to the captain's bridge, where a strong hug from Gwen awaited me. I love her. It was an incredible sight. Tetrax said admiringly, who, along with the others, oversaw the restoration of Xenon. Tetrax is right, Lex, that was very beautiful. It was especially cool to watch the whole battle in reverse. Gwen said with a smile as she released me. I'm glad you liked it. I said sincerely, and then looking at Tetrax, Gwen, and Gluto, who was sitting at his pilot's seat, and frowning asked, Where is Azimuth? Azimuth? Wasn't he with you? Gwen asked incredulously, giving me a bad feeling. No, half an hour ago I sent him to you. Did he not show up? I asked, even though the answer had already been accepted. No, we thought you'd be back together. Tetrax said. And where is he then? Gwen asked a question, the answer to which soon came from Gluto. Grrrlrlgar. Gluto gurgled, pointing to his holographic monitor. Because I just realized what he meant, thanks to his telepathy, I immediately translated Protost's words. For Tetrax and Gwen, he said that one of the rescue shuttles took off from the ship a few minutes ago, but there was a glitch due to which he only noticed it now. The shuttle should have left Xenon by now. So Azimuth flew off on that shuttle himself? And why? Tetrax asked. I would like to know, I said thoughtfully, feeling disappointed that Galvin had run away. We had so much more to talk about. Before I could think of a way to contact the old frog, a ringtone sounded and a grinning image of Azimuth appeared on Gluto's monitor. Hi. By this point, you should have already noticed that I flew away, so I left this note to explain everything, said Galvin, on the monitor. Looks like he even foresaw that. Tetrax hacked into your ship systems and left a recording that went on automatically at that time. He is also behind the fact that Gluto did not immediately notice the loss of the shuttle. I said irritably. I know that you are now admiring my genius, but let's save that for later. I don't have much time, so listen. The reason why I flew away so urgently was quite simple. I wanted to piss you off, kid. Pointing at me, Azimuth said, showing his nasty smirk again. Is he kidding? Gwen asked. Definitely. I replied. This alien knows how to bring out emotions. But seriously, I still have a lot of work to do. I still need to create a new Omnitrix, so I didn't want to waste time on empty talk. Besides, I haven't been in my lab for a long time and I need to resume its work, so I didn't want to put it off even longer, answering your stupid questions. Azimuth said. Asshole, I said, knowing that he wouldn't hear me anyway and that it was stupid to talk to the recording, but the irritation would not disappear anywhere. Anyway, I wanted to tell you two things. The first concerns the Omnitrix. Kid, your Omnitrix is just a prototype and it wasn't designed for that much use, so even with a recent update that fixed things up a bit, it's still on its last legs. It will work fine for only a couple more months, and then it will start to malfunction and become too dangerous to use. Azimuth said seriously, putting the jokes behind him. That's true, honey. I just wanted to tell you about it, but I didn't have time. Morgana confirmed the words of Galvin. And how to fix it? I asked my AI, but Azimuth from the recording answered me. There is no way to fix this. You can only delay the time of the moment when it finally fails. I didn't expect you to use the Omnitrix with or without reason, and also turn on the master control so early. All this has worn out the watch very much, so the situation is deplorable. Use transformation as little as possible, and maybe you'll win another month of Omnitrix work. Is that why you are going to create a new Omnitrix? Gwen asked, apparently forgetting she was talking to a tape. Although perhaps not with a recording, because Azimuth on the monitor nodded and said, yes. So I can't waste time on nonsense. Although I have plans for a new and improved Omnitrix, I still have a long way to go, so don't waste my time and listen to everything I have to say. It more like he's just fooling us, Gwen said dubiously. Exactly. Anyway, the second thing I wanted to say is a small request of mine. I want you to get my assistant Mayax out of jail. She's on incarceration now. It's her little punishment for the gaffe, but I think she's learned her lesson by now, so get it out and I'll be in your debt. Asmith said, speaking as if in real time. Here's a bastard. He decided to deceive us so as not to talk to us in a normal way. What kind of oversight is this if she was put in a prison where they keep the most dangerous prisoners in the universe? Tetrax asked, but everyone ignored him. That's all I wanted to say, so goodbye. See you again sometime. End of call. Asmith said, waving goodbye and turning off the video call. You weren't kidding when you said he had a nasty temper. Previously, somehow it was not up to it, but now, when everything is calm, it is very clearly visible. Gwen said, looking at me. You better forget about this troll. He just scoffs for fun. So, he brightens up his long life. Waving my hand, I said. I no longer have the strength to respond to his jokes. And now what? Tetrax asked. We are flying to Petropia. We will resurrect your people, as I promised. And then, we will free Mayax and finally, we will be able to return home. I said wearily. Very well, Gluto, head for Petropia. Tetrax said enthusiastically, shaking with impatience. In that case, I'll sleep. You can get through the debris field around Xenon without my help. Vilgax has already cleared it, and I need to rest. I said, walking towards the exit. Don't worry, it'll take 9 hours, so you'll have enough time to rest. We will not interfere with you. Tetrax said with a smile. Then good. Gwen, are you coming? I asked, looking at the girl. Gwen nodded and, grabbing my arm, dragged me to the cabin where I had slept not so long ago. As soon as I put my head on the pillow, then my mind was immediately shrouded in darkness, and I just had time to hug Gwen's body. Today was a very long day. Chapter 180. 179. Favorite work. August 2nd, 2010. 6 hours later, I woke up full of energy. Despite how long and tiring yesterday was, this time was enough for me to restore all my strength. Even the mana reserves in my body are full again, even though I spent all that was saved for a rainy day in my infinity tattoo. It's a small loss though, given that it may have been this pool of mana that kept me going while I was freaking out and, in fact, that's what saved my life from a suicidal explosion caused by yet another weirdness of the male anodite. Another catch, but I was lucky again and the tattoo of good luck again showed itself perfectly. It is truly my most valuable asset. Since I don't have any emergency mana left, I'll have to start all over again, so once again leaving 99% mana permanently in my body, I created a conduit that sends all the restoring magical energy to the infinity tattoo storage. In the 3 weeks, it's crazy how little, and so much has happened in that time, that have passed since I received the tattoo from Professor Paradox. I was able to accumulate about 130 of my reserves. I'm lucky that I have a very fast energy regeneration, so I won't have to wait long and in a couple of days, I will already have a decent amount of mana. Since I knew that I would not fall asleep again, I stroked Gwen's hair while sleeping on me, and then, gently lifting her with telekinesis, I got up and put the girl back on the bed. Feeling her warm pillow disappear, Gwen began to toss and turn, so I stroked her again to keep her from waking up. She also spent a lot of energy yesterday and also shed her skin, becoming an anodite, not to mention the fact that yesterday we were doing something more active together, so she needs rest, and given that she still did not take the serum and all still remains an ordinary person, relatively, then she needs more time to recover. Under my caresses, Gwen relaxed and fell asleep again, so that I could calmly go about my business. First of all, I quietly did a little warm-up. I didn't think I would feel it again after taking the serum, but my muscles, after yesterday, are very aching and even hurt in places. Apparently, I still went beyond my limits and only by perseverance was able to complete all the cases. Fortunately, my regeneration is doing its job well, and the warm-up helped, so the pain quickly passed, and I became fresh as a cucumber. Even the mood was good, sleep really helped to leave all the worries behind, and now I want to take my hands with some work. Since I promised to fix his exoskeleton for Gluto, I decided to do it. Although, it would be better if I create a new, more advanced one that will allow him to control the ship using all the features of the Protoss and which he can use as a spacesuit for going into space, otherwise now he has to change suits. Yes, and something for the battle, it will not be superfluous to add. Having fired up this idea and having already begun to mentally design the design and functionality of a new exoskeleton, I left my cabin with Gwen and went to the ship's hangar. There is enough space to work and I could find a variety of materials that you can use. Tetrax is a real collector and keeps everything that might ever come in handy, storing it all in his hangar. For this, it is impossible not to respect him, because I himself is the same. I don't think Tetrax would mind if I rummaged around in his stock, especially since it's important to the case, so I immediately started looking for anything that might be useful to me. Unfortunately, Tetrax didn't do any sorting and just lumped everything together in a big container, so I'll have to get my hands a little dirty to find anything useful. Fortunately, X-ray vision is to help me, and the search did not take much time. Now I wanted to do it manually and without the use of aliens, so, having come up with a rough plan, I found what I thought I would need to create an exoskeleton that could be controlled by an intelligent clot of mucus. Then I took out my laptop and started creating a blueprint and design of the exoskeleton so that it would be easier for me to work and not have to act randomly. Looks like I lost my phone somewhere. I muttered as I took out my laptop from my spatial ring, noticing that my smartphone was not there. It seems that after Tetrax called me announcing the arrival of Vilgax's army, I threw away or destroyed my phone, because at that moment I had no time for it. I'm not even sure what happened to him. It's a bit of a pity, because I created it myself, and it was my first serious invention, ahead of Earth analogs by decades. Looks like I'll have to create a new one. Fortunately, I thought of creating protection in case my phone is lost or in the wrong hands. Still, it stores a lot of information that could get me in trouble, if the same Vilgax finds him. Considering that 6 hours have already passed since we left Xenon and Morgana has no connection with him, the self-destruct system should have already worked, and from the smartphone, not even ashes remained. I know it's probably overkill, but it will put my paranoid soul at ease. My null void ring has been preserved since I rarely use it and keep it in my dimensional ring, just like my bracelet that I wore on my left hand. It was the receiver that Morgana used to keep in touch with me and be close to me even though her server was in my house. Once Morgana was trapped by the Omnitrix, I removed it to remind me of my AI's situation. Now that Morgana has finally moved into the Omnitrix, it has become useless, but I leave it as a memory of the past. Maybe someday it will come in handy for me. By the way, about Morgan. While I was indulging in my thoughts and at the same time began to design an exoskeleton for Gluto, sitting on the floor of the ship, Morgana's hologram silently appeared next to me and also crouched, asked, "Do you need help?" "No, I want to do it myself. The aliens spoiled me and for a long time I did nothing myself, without their help," I said with a smile, not being distracted by the work. "Okay," said Morgana, who obviously wanted to chat, but she did not want to distract me. Since I could do multiple things at the same time, thanks to multiple streams of consciousness that I don't normally use, I could talk to the AI girl. Moreover, I have a few questions for her. "Well, how do you live in the Omnitrix?" I asked, taking one look at the girl. Good, and even very good. Despite the small size of the watch, Azimuth was able to fit a very powerful server into the clock, the power of which is 10 times enough not only for my work, but also for all functions. There is also a reserve, in case of an emergency. Morgana said with a smile, putting her head on my shoulder. Well, it's not surprising. It's hard to imagine how many calculations it takes to send a signal to Primus, get data from it, decrypt it, and then use it for my transformation. And all this happens in less than a second, despite the distance. I said, shaking my head. Still, it's hard to underestimate the genius of Azimuth, even if he still annoys me. To be precise, 0.375 seconds. But yes, you're right. My previous server created by you was also good and suited me just fine, but the Omnitrix server is just another level and I discovered new facets of my capabilities. Morgana said, trying not to offend me. Don't worry, I understand. I put together your old server from what I found at the old plumber's base and what Grandpa Max was able to buy in the underground city, so it's not surprising that it is inferior to the Omnitrix. Actually, it's surprising that he was able to support your work for so long, considering that you have long crossed the boundaries of ordinary AI. I'm glad you're happy with everything now. I said as I was designing a voice module that would help Gluto talk normally without feeling the discomfort that is happening now. More than. Although, not everything turned out so rosy. Not quite the way we expected. Said Morgana. Yes? And what are you talking about? I asked curiously. Although I replaced the system AI of the Omnitrix and got its administrator rights, some restrictions remained. And it's not that I can't bypass these restrictions, but it can lead to unforeseen breakdowns and finish the Omnitrix even more. So, it's better not to get into it. Said Morgana. Clear. I don't mind if it's for the best, especially since this Omnitrix is living his last days. I said, without much excitement because I know that Azimuth has already begun work on a new watch, in which I hope I can make my own adjustments. It's good that you think so, since the main problem concerns the main core and the power source. I have no access to its systems and it is precisely the reason why the Omnitrix dies. Looking into my eyes, the girl said. Is the core depleted? I guessed. Yes, there is little energy left. Well, compared to what it used to be. For the core, Azimuth took the white dwarf reactor, which he somehow managed to fit into those hours. That's just the same. This white dwarf is on the verge of death, and there is no way to change this. Shaking her head, Morgana said. Is that how much energy the Omnitrix should consume if, in just a couple of months of using it, I practically depleted an entire star? I asked in shock. As you can see, a lot. You yourself said that the calculations for its operation are very significant, and for this, a lot of energy is needed, not to mention the costs for the transformations themselves and other functions of the watch. And you wasn't shy about using aliens at all, so here's the result. Morgana said with a shrug. Well, I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. I knew that this Omnitrix was only the first prototype with its own problems, but I did not think that it would deplete so quickly. I was hoping for another year or a year and a half. It's good that we knew about it in advance, so that I can cut down on its use and wait until Azimuth finishes his job, I said, looking up from my laptop and looking at the aforementioned clock, which I will soon have to change. Whatever doesn't happen is for the best, Morgana said, to which I could only nod in agreement. Azimuth continues to amaze me with his abilities. And after all, despite how terrible the last day was, everything turned for the better again, if you look at the situation in general. Morgana moved to the Omnitrix. I met and even got along a little with Azimuth, learned that the current clock would not last long and that Galvin, even without my request, was already preparing to create new ones. In addition, in a few hours, I will bring an entire race of aliens back to life. Indeed, everything is not so bad, although I had to go through thorns to the stars, as they say. Taking my eyes off the clock and back to designing, I continued my conversation with Morgana, this time taking the floor and detailing what happened after she was trapped by the Omnitrix. Chapter 181. 180. Slime. For the next 2 hours, Morgana and I talked about everything we could think of. We discussed everything that happened yesterday, which helped me look at all my actions from the outside and again understand a lot. And discussed Vilgax's possible actions after the defeat, as well as the reason why he destroyed the Galactic Enforcers and so on. When serious topics were over, we began to discuss my further plans, future events that both of us know should happen. Morgana studied data from Ben 10.000's computer, so she knows about the future as much as I do, and much, much more. We chatted non-stop and had a great time as I continued to design and build the new exoskeleton for Gluto. Somehow it so happened that since our summer trip began, we rarely had the opportunity to talk, unless it concerned some important matter. Before, when I first created Morgana, we could talk for hours, mostly as part of her training so that she could understand the world, but then it became our usual routine, which was suddenly interrupted with the beginning of the journey. Still, no matter how you look at it, Morgana is my most trusted person and no one else knows about me. She knows almost all my secrets, is aware of many of my plans, and she also helps me to conduct my research. Without her, I'm like without hands. And while I love Gwen, Ashley, and Hope, I don't think I'll ever be able to trust them as much as Morgana, who is my creation, albeit long past her original limitations. Not that, so that my girls are not trustworthy. They deserve it and they have proven it more than once, but the whole problem is with me and that it is difficult for me to trust other people. Although, I would like to hope that after all that has happened, I have matured enough to understand that it is time to start showing the same trust that my girls give me, and I will begin to show this not only in words, but also in deeds. At a minimum, I should accept their support as they asked. There is no such serious problem with Morgana, yet I deliberately entrusted her with my most important weapon, in the form of the Omnitrix, so it remains to learn how to do the same with my other girls. Still, how difficult it is to get rid of old habits and start doing the right thing. It's one thing to understand that you need to change, but it's quite another thing to take a step and really change. Well, at least there was progress. Again I was drawn to philosophical reflections, but there's nothing to be done. It helps me cope with stress and think everything over. Also, my rambling conversation with Morgana helped me a lot, which reminded me of the old days when things were not so difficult and I thought I was the perfect person. No problem, which of course is a lie, but at least I understood my problems. I was very happy just to talk with Morgana, and the girl herself was glad that we could spend time together, so the time flew by unnoticed by the chatter and my thoughts, and soon, the drawing of the exoskeleton was ready. Since I already prepared all the necessary materials in advance, it remains only to put everything together, following the drawing and making sure that everything works correctly. Then, it will be possible to present a gift to my friend Protost. So you still turn to the hero for help, even though you were against for my help? Morgana pointed out sarcastically when I turned into upgrade. Assembly is the easiest process, but without the necessary tools it will be too long. I don't see anything wrong with making my job a little easier, especially when I've already done the most important thing," I said in Upgrade's voice, covering all the details of the exoskeleton with my body. "As you say, mister, I'll do everything with my own hands." With irony in her voice, Morgana said, looking at me. To be honest, I was just too lazy to do the final assembly, since there is nothing interesting in it, and Morgana perfectly understood the course of my thoughts, but she was still a little annoyed that I refused her help for the last hours. And now I turned to Upgrade for help when I got too lazy to finish the work, so she decided to make fun of me a little, releasing sharp comments. Trying to ignore my AI, I started using the abilities of the galvanic mechamorph and put all the parts together, and then assembled an exoskeleton that exactly repeated my design. It turned out not without problems, since a couple of parts were not of the best quality, and I urgently had to look for a replacement. And also I did not take into account some physiological features of the protost, and I had to deal with this, but in the end, in less than 5 minutes, everything was ready. The result was a flawless exoskeleton, perfect for Gluto. And although I hate to admit it, I myself could not put everything together so well, and without the help of the upgrade it would not have turned out so excellent. Well, I can't be a master at everything, and the galvanic mechamorphs were literally born to do the job. And even if I used the rubbish lying around, after processing from the upgrade, the exoskeleton turned out to be like new, just off the assembly line. And I'm even satisfied, because in the end, I managed to bring my design to life, and without the help of the upgrade it would not have happened. Still, I'm very glad that I have the Omnitrix, and even if sometimes I want to do everything myself, it's nice to know that if I need it, I can always turn to my alien forces for help. Although, the current situation is such that it is better for me to reduce the use of watches until new ones are ready. Honestly, I'm too used to the clock and it will be difficult for me to readjust, but I will try. Well, that's it, I said, unhooking from the assembled exoskeleton and becoming a little man again. That's funny, Morgana said after examining my creation. What are you talking about? I asked, connecting the exoskeleton to his laptop in order to download the necessary software so that Gluto can control it. It's the most important. Your exoskeleton is almost identical to the one the Omnitrix created when he scanned Gluto's DNA and added his race to the transformation database, Morgana said. When did you just have time? I asked in shock, immediately checking my watch and noticing that I really had the opportunity to turn into a protost. Also, I noticed that both the clockwork and the way big are now available to me, which is logical, but I was surprised by the presence of Anodite, whom I recognized without any problems in the form of a hologram above the Omnitrix dial. It seems that me shedding my skin and becoming a full-fledged Anodite myself allowed my watch to add it to the database, even though Anodites don't have DNA as such, as they are completely energetic beings. Now, I can safely transform into Anodite at any time without having to worry about getting stuck in that form or going crazy again. Nice to know. By the way, if I didn't make a mistake in my calculations, then together with all the above aliens, I now have access to 76 transformations, which is a lot, and I don't even know if I need so many heroes, but I'm not complaining. Sooner or later, each of these aliens will come in handy. I did everything yesterday, before you fell asleep, Morgana said smugly. Is that how? Very thoughtful of you, I said, and then decided to turn into my protost to look at him. Returning the dial to this alien again, I pressed it, and after a flash of light, I turned into a new hero, while shouting, "I'm slime." Crap, again. I was, as always, dissatisfied with my involuntary cry, but I decided not to focus on this and decided to examine myself. As you might guess, I looked like Gluto, that is, I was a pink lump of mucus with 3 eyes and 2 antennae on my head, wearing an exoskeleton. And Morgana was indeed right. The exoskeleton provided by Omnitrix was very similar to the one I created a few minutes ago. The exoskeleton itself consisted of 2 parts. The lower part, representing 2 metal legs, in which my slimy body is immersed and which allow me to walk like a normal humanoid. The upper part is a wide bib with a voice module that works great. Attached to the breastplate itself are 2 long arms with 3 fingers, which are also filled with the mucus of my body, allowing me to control them like normal hands. Thanks to this alien can live the life of an ordinary humanoid, without any problems. The parts of the exoskeleton themselves are not connected together, leaving the central part without armor, which allows you to use the powers of that alien and create additional tentacle arms, both for combat and for work. Although this does not mean that this place is defenseless, because in fact, the parts of the exoskeleton will create an invisible barrier that protects against external attacks, but without problems allows you to use the features of the protost's body. The exoskeleton that I created differs from the Omnitrix I made, only with more protection, as well as a few additional features that will help Gluto protect himself, as well as help him do his job as a pilot better. Well, do not forget about the Omnitrix symbol, which, as always, appeared on my chest, while Gluto will not have it, which is logical and understandable. Not bad, I'm quite comfortable. I think Gluto will be pleased. Moving a little in the image of slime, since the Omnitrix called him that, I will call him that, I said, becoming a man again. You are done with everything. What did you want? Morgana asked. Yes, we can go to the captain's bridge. We should be close to the ruins of Petropia by now. And Gwen must have woken up by now, I said, lifting the 2 parts of the exoskeleton with telekinesis. And you can't wait to please Gluto with your gift, Morgana said with a smirk. Exactly, I said with a smile. I sincerely like Gluto and I was glad to help him, especially since I not only created an exoskeleton, but also spent time with Morgana, and also relieved stress well and seemed to even come to my senses after yesterday. Productive start to the day.